Are you experiencing back pain that you can't get rid of? Getting migraines, vertigo, having trouble sleeping, and/or brain fog? Do you feel like your medical doctor doesn't understand your condition? Blair Chiropractic might be the solution you've been looking for. If you've ever been skeptical about this, the two doctors you're about to listen to were even more skeptical than you were when they looked into chiropractic work. But fear not. Get expert guidance from the blonde and the bald, Doctors Beth Bagley and Frederick Schurger. These two doctors have extensive experience beyond the healthcare realm and bringing unique vision and healing to their patients. What do you have when you get a biological analyst and an engineer together? Find out right here on another episode of The Blonde and the Bald. Welcome your hosts, Doctors Bagley and Schurger.
So we are on episode 3 of The Blonde and the Bald. And last week we went over your testimonial, and then you ran around Kansas City.
I did.
And that was, how was that?
It was pretty amazing seeing these young athletes performing at their national tournament. My two girls, they're 13-year-old twins, and they got 4th place overall and 2nd place in their division. So
nice.
That was pretty great to see. It was
Good
very exciting.
stuff.
It was fun to watch.
Good. I went to a conference.
Yeah, I saw pictures of you.
Yeah, oddly enough, running into somebody else, I'm like, I recognize this guy from somewhere. And
was it Greg Gersten?
Yeah. I run into Greg and a couple of others who I just got to hang out with and chat with, and got to hear some good stuff. Got to hear Liam Schubelt speak and a couple of others. And
what conference was this?
It was the Illinois Prairie State Chiropractic Association.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So
that's why I didn't go, because I'm not in Illinois.
No, you're not. And anyways, that's where I was. And then I ran around afterwards and hopefully got all the equipment I need for a good hunting experience this weekend. We shall see. Yes.
I'm looking forward to getting some deer sausage or something.
Yeah, or something. Well, if there's backstrap, I'll bring backstrap. So
fun. Well, today in our podcast, I think one of the things that I want to start off with asking you is, what's your chiropractic story? How did you decide to become a chiropractor? What led you here?
So this was a very circular path, because I had a little bit of chiropractic care growing up, not quite as close as you did, but I had, we had a local guy who I wish I'd had a chance to talk with him, but we never did. We never connected. We were talking about connecting, and that never happened. But my experience, my first experience, was when I was in engineering school. My background, I went to Rose-Hulman in Terre Haute, Indiana, planning to be an electrical engineer and all sorts of fun stuff. And somewhere in my sophomore year, I have the worst back pain ever. And I'm just miserable. So I'm like, the chiropractor helped me in the past. I'm going to go find a chiropractor.
Approximately how old were you during this?
Probably 19 or 20.
Okay.
Somewhere at that point. We're looking around, we find someone, I don't even know a thing about insurance at this point in time, but apparently I have health insurance through my dad. Nice. So I connect with this guy down the road, and I'm used to go in, find the problem, work it, like many chiropractors do, and you're better, you're on the road. At the very, maybe you need a couple of follow-up visits in a short order. This guy wanted me to, before he would do anything else, he wanted to do an exam. I understand that an exam is important. But at the time, I'm like, but doc, it hurts back here. Get that fixed. And I'm like, okay, fine. We do the exam, figure out what he finds. And then he wants to do all this electrotherapy, this TENS, this heat. He can't adjust me if my back hasn't gone through this and relaxed. And my brain is thinking, well, okay, you've got newer stuff. That sounds great. Didn't really help.
So your first introduction to chiropractic is what we would call more of a conventional chiropractor.
Well, I would even say my first introduction to a chiropractor was a conventional Palmer chiropractor, because he was a Palmer doc who focused on adjusting the spine. Mm-hmm. Whereas my first adult introduction in this case here was to a doc that wanted to do every therapy under the sun before he would even adjust me, which I've never responded well to. I had another guy years later, which we may touch on, who's, we got to massage you before, you're relaxed enough. And I'm like, if you can get the bone moving, it especially, this is a full spine conventional chiropractor. They're going to focus on everything from your atlas down to your sacrum. We'll talk about why that's not accurate later. But anyways, I go about 2 or 3 weeks and I'm just not feeling better. You know what I did, Beth? What I did was I took my wallet, which was about this thick, maybe a little bit thicker. And I took it from my back pocket where it had been, because that's where young men put their pockets in billfolds because it looks Absolutely. Cool. And I moved it to my front pocket. I did some stretching, chatted with my uncle who understood this stuff a little bit better than I did, and I was better. And I was also completely antithetical. I wasn't ever going back to a chiropractor ever again.
Yeah,
that's how
they didn't know what they were talking about.
Well, they really didn't. They didn't explain it well. And quite honestly, I felt like they wanted to bill the insurance. And at a certain point in time, I'm like, I'm not getting better. Why am I still coming in?
Yeah, I think a lot of people will have that experience. And unfortunately, that might be their only experience with chiropractic, because why would they go back?
Right.
But the truth is if you have like a bad dental experience, it's not like you're never going to see a dentist again. You just have to find a different one.
Exactly.
So going back to that question of why would something in your back pocket cause your back to hurt? Sure.
Aside from the fact that I am sitting in class for something like 8 hours a day, then I'm going back to the fraternity house and sitting at my desk doing another 8 hours of homework. It was engineering, and Rose Holman had a very aggressive schedule. So it was just, I'm sitting all the time, and I'm sitting and I'm running around, and sure enough, that's got my entire hip off balance. So I'm never quite sitting level. I take that thing out of my back pocket, and almost immediately, within about a day, it was better. So
I think like what that brings up in my mind is some of our patients who might have a broken foot and they're wearing a boot.
Oh, definitely.
So the same thing could happen is the boot is this big and their shoe is this big.
Right.
And so now they're walking unbalanced over and over. And you know what starts hurting is their back.
Mm-hmm.
So, as chiropractors, we have answers for that. A lot of times they're just like, take some ibuprofen, it'll get better. Well,
right.
It can actually cause long-term damage. So I'm glad you figured that out before it caused long-term damage.
Absolutely.
Okay, fast forward to how did you decide to go to chiropractic school?
So that's, so I graduate from Rose. I start doing my engineering stuff. I'm all over the country. They've got me as a installation engineer, and that, for what I was doing, we call it fancy robot jockey is really what it was. So I'm traveling all over the country, doing pretty good, trying to get in shape, trying to lose some weight, focusing on my health at the very least. I mean, I dropped from probably about 240 pounds down to probably the 190s over the next couple of years, trying to get in shape. And I'm just looking, and I'm really frustrated with work. So I'm like, all right, I want to get out of this line of engineering and go to another line of engineering, project management type thing. I'm practicing Kung Fu at this point in time. Mm-hmm. I am just having a ball doing that. It's exactly what my mind and body and soul needed for just a different experience, a different break. And I have a fall on the mats, as I would multiple nights a week.
Yeah.
The next morning I wake up and all of a sudden I can't get out of bed. Now I'm lucky that I've got a medical doctor like three houses down at the main street where I was living. And I walk on down there. I'm like, all right, I redislocated a shoulder that I dislocated in high school. Let's get a new x-ray on it, see what's going on. Because it feels like I've dislocated the shoulder. I hurt everywhere. Nothing. It's still a grade 1 dislocation. It hasn't gotten any worse. It's stable. She gives me some meds. And at that point in time, I make an appointment with a friend's chiropractor who's been trying to get me in there. They said, hey, if you ever need me, I'm here. So I said, this is one of those times. This is a structural problem. If anybody's dealing with structural problems, it's a chiropractor. So I go see him, and within and again, we're still dealing with the entire spine. This is another Palmer graduate, and he's focusing on correcting these, what we call vertebral subluxation, certainly from the Palmer school. But again, full spine. I've got some shoulder stuff, some upper back stuff, and some low back stuff that are my main complaints. I go in there, and he does a workup, takes x-rays. The guy in Terre Haute didn't take any x-rays. He said, we're going to put you on all this stuff. Finds the problem, gets them fixed. And I'm like, hey, I feel brand new. And I realized very quickly that this chiropractic stuff was allowing me to do my Kung Fu more, which I was loving. And I'm like, all right, wait a second. I keep on knocking myself out of adjustment doing the Kung Fu. So I better learn how to do this stuff. So I've got a friend who I can reciprocate with, who can work on me so I can keep on doing all the stuff that I'm going to do. And I can remember almost as clearly as we're talking right now, I had on my desk, like right here, this would be my workspace. I'd have my computer up here this was up at the engineering cubicle I was at. And then to my left, I had an application for an MBA that was half filled out for at least 6 or 8 months that I immediately pitched, because I'd realized as I was going, taking some classes, that this chiropractic thing was something I wanted to do. So fast forward, I get to Palmer College in 2002, at which point in time I am finding, someone to take care of me. And, I'm still having all these problems. My low back still hurts. I need to get adjusted at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. And I get into the student clinic, and they're working on me. They're taking care of me. Sometimes they can get that low back to clear out. Sometimes they can't. This goes on for a year. And during this time, I end up taking a outside class that's not part of the normal college curriculum. That is basically one of these techniques that has a lot of other things going on with it. And I ended up paying my own money outside of, the college. College takes care of you and gives you free care as a student. It's a nice bonus. But I ended up paying out of pocket for somebody off campus, sometimes twice a week, for probably most of the summer of my going into my first at the end of my first year. And at this time, we are also introducing the first upper cervical class, the toggle recoil that you talked about last week. And I'm like, this is great stuff. I'm going to learn everything that I can. I'm going to experience all of these techniques because all of them work. And this is the problem with the guy from Terre Haute. I don't know if he knew any other techniques other than physiotherapy, to be quite honest. And that's, he practiced what he knew. This is the good and bad about chiropractic. There is a different chiropractor for every person. And some people, some patients fit our mold and some patients fit somebody else's mold. And that's quite all right.
It is totally okay. I always say I'm a good chiropractor, but I'm not everybody's chiropractor.
Exactly. So anyways, I remember one of my classmates is Dr. Justin Brown, or now Dr. Justin Brown, who's down in South Florida, Miami area. He was, starting his clinic, and I said, hey, let's get me some x-rays for the toggle recoil. And sure enough, he he takes the pictures, gets me adjusted. I feel great. Beginning of August. And I joke about this being my chiropractic birthday because it's pretty close to my actual birthday. I get adjusted and my low back pain is better. I'm like, hey,
Right?
this is neat stuff. So that's beginning of August. By the end of August, I have stopped going to the other doctor because I wasn't getting any value out of that anymore. And early September, I realized, wait a second, my low back doesn't hurt. There's something to this upper cervical work. So
real quick, I'm going to interrupt you and bring it back to like a patient story, is that I've had patients tell me, like, at first, can I go to my regular or conventional chiropractor, even though I'm seeing you? And I'll tell them, sure, just I'm going to be adjusting your neck, have them not adjust your neck. And many times they don't need to see that other chiropractor anymore. And I think that's exactly what you saw too, which is really cool. Well, again, I'm not saying that that works for everyone, but it definitely works for me, and I get it for you too. So.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I immediately noticed, and I mentioned earlier, I was getting checked at least once a week, sometimes twice a week, because my low back hurt that much. It took me a while to realize it, but I didn't need an adjustment for over a month. Because of that first Atlas adjustment that I got, again, my chiropractic birthday, as I like to put it.
So with an Atlas adjustment, like a toggle or like what we do, the Blair technique, remembering back to your first adjustment or subsequent ones, was it painful to get that adjustment? Did it hurt?
That adjustment did not. But Justin also practices a technique called NUCA, which is another one of the upper cervical techniques. There are 5 that we'll include toggle as a 6th one, but there are 5 that are very popular that we tend to refer to people. And his technique is very gentle. I mean, if you feel it, they're doing something wrong. So with him, I didn't. But at a later class, one of my reciprocating docs that we were working back and forth as we were learning some of the advanced toggle work, he was a little deep on his adjustment. So we could say with time comes more precision.
Exactly. And you'll find that a doctor that's been doing it for more years will have a gentler adjustment and not such a deep one. Because really, an upper cervical adjustment shouldn't hurt. I mean, sometimes it's tender when someone pokes on you, but the actual adjustment should be so gentle and precise it shouldn't hurt. So. Yeah.
And the times that I find it's as we're setting up and getting on there,
the setup.
That's usually when it's most tender for patients and people. So, any case, 3 to 6 months later is when we started getting into the Blair work on campus.
Awesome.
And
I wish that would have been on my campus.
I know it. In fact, it's funny. He's over in Cincinnati. He and his wife practice. Yes. Brent Owens was part of our first Blair class on campus. And that's when I met him. So his
wife went to school with me.
Right. So it's funny how small the world is and how connected we have become because of all of these people. So, but yes, if you could find the class to be offered, sometimes you could take it, even if it took you a 5-hour drive and 3 weekends to do it, is what we were doing at the time. And one of the interesting things about the Blair work that was different for me, my low back pain was gone just from my Atlas, but I was still having that chronic sinusitis that I would have on a regular basis. So I was sneezing and hacking and coughing, and it was bad. And when we got me under the Blair work, all of a sudden that goes away. Now, it was still bad because I had a hard time holding my adjustment because I've had a couple of concussions at this point in time. I like beating myself up. The program,
and going through school, you probably were over adjusted.
Exactly. Well, potentially, but oftentimes it wasn't. We weren't even. We stopped doing anything but upper cervical at that time for my neck. So it was pretty obvious when I was out of adjustment.
Yeah.
And we would, we'd get it back in, and the worst part was, it would be 4 to 8 hours before the sinuses drainage would really taper off. So oftentimes I'd get adjusted and I have to go take a nap for 2 to 4 hours just for that immediate symptom to go away. Now 15, almost 20 years later, it's not nearly as bad when I need to get adjusted. It's there. I might need a couple hours before it really dissipates, but it is less problematic now. So it's definitely a road that takes a while for things to heal, because it's not an overnight treatment, as it were.
No, and it's not like, if in the past I had a headache, I could take an Advil and 30 minutes later, the headache's gone.
Yep.
But really, is the headache gone or just the symptoms of the headache? Now, chiropractic, we're not treating symptoms. So what we're treating is a specific misalignment. And if we get this specific misalignment, all that does is unlock the body's ability to start healing, which is super cool.
Yes.
It's one of those things that I wish people could, and that's what I'm hoping with this podcast, is people can see why we are so excited about this stuff, is that we've had personal experience. Most chiropractors, especially upper cervical chiropractors, aren't going to go and they didn't wake up one day and say, I want to be an upper cervical specific chiropractor. Most of us have stories about how we discovered this for ourselves. And it's so exciting to see our patients come in, and then some of them even become chiropractors, which is like the thing that warms our little chiropractic hearts the most, is when they decide to change the lives of others around them with chiropractic care.
And that was the hardest thing for me to wrap my head around, because I had a couple of classmates at the end of our second try. So chiropractic school tends to have about 10 trimesters, or I think it's 11 quarters. I can't remember, or maybe it's 12 quarters.
Oh, it's more quarters than,
But anyways, whatever it is, it takes about 3.5 years to condense a 5-year program together.
Yep.
But at the end of the second trimester, I remember a couple of my classmates, they're both practicing upper cervical elsewhere, but they come back from visiting another college saying, we've got to do this upper cervical. It's all Atlas axis. And my engineering brain says there are 24, right? Yeah. Between here and the pelvis, movable segments. How can just 2 take care of the rest? And this is why I much prefer using a phrase like neuro-structural shift to describe what we're addressing with these misalignments, because there is such a profound neurological impact on the body that is actually driving all of this. In fact, I had a patient come in today in her 50s. She got adjusted on Monday, and I asked, how you doing? And she's like, my neck still hurts, doc, but my low back feels awesome. And she's like, how did this work on that? And and I told her, but
it's a global shift. This one thing is like the foundation of a house.
Absolutely.
If the foundation shifts, the house will start getting cracks, and it will start getting the doors don't open and close if that foundation shifts. Now, in a house, if we fix the foundation, those cracks and stuff, they still have to be fixed, but they won't keep getting worse. And the foundation in our body is right here. And when that shifts the low back, and it'll cause low back pain so often in people.
And my big joke is, if you've ever watched Jimmy Neutron, there was an episode where they are off on some planet battling like 2 other races. And one of the races are literally brains in a fishbowl with a spine hanging off it, but the brains are floating around because they're able to do that. It's the funniest thing. But I think about that and I'm like, oh yeah, because we can't just have our brains in our head float around in gravity. We need this body to get us around and move us around in gravity. So, but the principle still stands. We've got to keep this level, and that's what our body's trying to do. And if that upper neck, that foundation, like you said, is out of place, we're done. We're done. We've got problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you had to do it all over again, would you have changed your path at all? Or do you think you learned through your path?
I definitely learned through my path. Let's be honest. I would do business things differently. There's a lot of business things I would do very
we all make
different.
Mistakes there.
No. Sometimes you don't get taught these things. And sometimes you're already bullheaded enough that you're like, I think that's what I'm going to do. And that's going to be fine. And no one's going to tell me otherwise. But no, everything that I've learned, the few things that I might do differently is getting, the cone beam sooner, getting the advanced technology faster, if only because the stuff that we are seeing now on a day-to-day basis. I had a patient who had Meniere's.
Yeah.
Came in to see me back in 2016 and hasn't been back, for about, since I think it was early 2017 that was the last time she was in. She was seeing another chiropractor and she's been doing fine up until about a month ago. And then all of a sudden her vertigo and Meniere's is coming back. Now,
awful.
To put it in perspective, she doesn't have a right eardrum. I don't think there's anything there. Now, there might be something deep in there, but she doesn't have a right eardrum. She has an ear, but no eardrum.
Is that like surgically removed or just not there?
This was how she was born. So
wow.
There were a couple of other odds and ends in that area, but her atlas was out the same way. But generally speaking, we updated the angles, and she's been feeling great since she got adjusted last week. So yeah, it's fantastic. It's amazing the stuff we see, and I would, and the other reason. Let me tell you why we got the cone beam. I don't know if I've shared this with you. I've shared this one with you, but obviously not here on the podcast because this is new. I pulled the trigger for the cone beam because I had what is described as trigeminal neuralgia last spring.
Yeah.
I had a small tree. It was about yay big, 40 feet tall, decide to fall on my head.
Oh my gosh.
In fairness,
I don't know if I've heard this story.
In fairness, I was chainsawing the base trying to knock it down, and it went the wrong way on my head. Now, here's the crazy part. So that was it would have been Memorial Day weekend. I get checked Thursday of the following week, and everything is fine. I am not out of adjustment. Something switched because it just hadn't, it was still under control of the body, but not out of adjustment. But
the functional changes haven't happened yet.
So I don't know what happened, but something switched. And on Friday, I was up in the middle of the night trying to deal with the worst sinus facial pain that I'd ever had. So, it's all the sinus stuff that happens when I'm out of adjustment. That came in, but it came in such a severe fashion. And it's funny because I can feel it right now talking about it.
Thinking about it.
Is basically like right through here. It felt like just a knife in my face. In hindsight, I realized it was trigeminal neuralgia.
Yeah.
And I went to get adjusted Saturday morning. Let's put this in perspective. If the second coming happens while I am sleeping, I'm screwed because
you're not going to wake up.
I will not wake up. If it's in the middle of the night between roughly about 10 o'clock and 6 a.m., it's not happening. I do not. Jean, my wife Jean's tried to wake me up, and it's like, no, not happening. I'm dead to the world. This had woken me up, and if I'd gotten more than about 3 hours of sleep total in the night, I'm literally sitting in the shower with hot water coming down on my head, trying to just deal with some of this pain I emptied the tank.
For just the listeners, is this thing called trigeminal neuralgia. They also call it the suicide disease because people that live in this amount of pain sometimes see no other way out, which is awful. But come to find out, we have an answer to this.
We do. And I get adjusted Saturday morning. I drive down to my doc's office, and he works on me. I go out to the car. He doesn't have resting rooms in his office. So I go out to my car. I take a nap for probably about 45 minutes, come back in, have him check me one more time. I think he did something else. I'm still having problems. I'm not nearly as severe. We've come down from a 10 to maybe an 8 Saturday, or the rest of Saturday and Sunday is still miserable. I see some patients Monday morning, and I hit the road to run down to Dr. Vagno's office in Glen Carbon, where he's got one of these machines. He runs a new scan on me, and sure enough, something's out differently. I believe it was my number, my second cervical, what we call axis or C2. And sure enough, we get that put back into place. And I can really feel that intensity drop from maybe that 8 to 3 or 4. So that was the direction I needed to go in. And I realized I need this machine to be able to make the determination, because if you're having that problem, we need to take that picture. And again, this is, I don't wish trigeminal neuralgia. Okay. Maybe my worst enemy.
No, you don't.
I mean, I'll adjust them after, but I mean, they should experience real pain.
Let them feel that real pain.
Just a little bit. But anyone who's dealing with this, suffering from trigeminal neuralgia shouldn't. And this is why I was mentioning that I could feel the pain coming on talking about this. James Tomasi, who was,
rest in peace.
Yeah, absolutely. He had trigeminal neuralgia, and he was about to kill himself. His book is What Time Tuesday? And he was talking about all of this. He had written the note. He had purchased the gun. He knew what time everyone would be out of the house so that he could basically take his life. James was a preacher, Christian preacher, and born again, and he knew that suicide wasn't real. And after he gets his first adjustment, get this, nothing happened. He got adjusted. His wife paid for the x-rays. She paid for the whole thing. He gets adjusted. They've got a follow-up appointment the following week, and he gets, she tickles behind his ear, and nothing happens. So he just goes back up to his pain cave, curls back up, shuts all the curtains, and he's just sitting there on his bed when all of a sudden he has a moment of clarity. And it's maybe 20 minutes that the pain diminished enough for him to realize, wait a second, something just happened. I don't know what it was, but he realized that it wasn't God telling him he should commit suicide. It was the devil. At least that's how he tells the story. So he ends up sending thousands of patients, but only trigeminal neuralgia patients, to this one doctor over in, I want to say she was Nebraska area or something like that. But this is the beautiful thing about the upper cervical work that we do. It's not a condition specific. It is what is wrong with your body not functioning the way it's supposed to.
Right. And that's, I love when I get questions like, can what you do help with, and fill in the blank? Right. And it's very rare that I say no. I can relate pretty much everything to the nervous system. Now, I don't tell them that it's for sure going to help, because we don't know. Like if you have stomach aches and I find out that you eat Doritos 3 times a day, probably not because of an upper cervical misalignment. So yeah, there's definitely some things that we can do to like harm ourselves. But in general, if you have a health issue going on, this is something that should be checked. And honestly, even if you don't have a health issue going on, get it checked. And that's why we love checking kids here, is we check kids in this office, not because they have something wrong. I mean, of course, sometimes they do, but it's because parents are getting amazing care and they want to make sure their kids don't grow up and have issues in the future. So if we correct, and maybe 1 or 2 out of like 6 or 10 patients or kid patients will come in, and I will even need to adjust them. There's many of them that will not need adjustments. But as they get older and they're playing sports, or, they've been into a car accident or something, that we're going to find something. Right. And correcting it before they have symptoms is so amazing. And
this was I've had this argument with my folks in the past, but it was a money thing, and they didn't understand that, there was a health benefit for all of us young, little kids getting better. But I'm a family of 6, oldest of 6. And if my back hurt a little bit, maybe we would have one of us when mom went into the chiropractor, one of us would get a go in too. But what I didn't realize that was probably a problem that I was having growing up was
Yeah.
I was having, I had bedwetting problems growing up. And all of a sudden I find out later, it's like, if I'd gotten adjusted, maybe that problem would have gone away and I would not have been dealing with that for so many years. So,
I mean, and it makes so much sense with bedwetting. Is like the brain isn't talking to the bladder.
Right.
And the bladder isn't talking to the brain.
Right.
And if those two systems aren't talking to each other or not 100% talking to each other, the kids don't know that this is happening. And so many parents get frustrated and mad.
And they blame the kid.
And it's like, why are you so lazy? And it's like, there's a connection issue. It's like blaming, if like all of a sudden our connection ended, I said, why did you do that? It wasn't me or you, it was the connection.
And what most people don't realize about the bladder actually has two places that it shuts down, what they call sphincters, but two of them, one that you can control and the other one that you can't. And there's a little area between those two that if even a little bit of drop of moisture gets between them, they both open like the floodgates of a dam, and you can't control it. So, especially when you're young.
A sphincter says what? A sphincter says what? A sphincter says what? Say what? Say what?
What?
Say what?
You
said sphincter, and I had to go straight into what is that? Garth and Wayne, Wayne's World.
No, I suppose that is Wayne's World.
It is. It's a Wayne's World. And then the guy says, what? And he goes, exactly.
Any case, it's not the kid's fault. They need to get their head on straight. And we can definitely help those folks out.
It really is amazing. And as hard as being a business owner and a doctor is, but it's so rewarding and so amazing. And I hope by us doing a podcast like this, someone out there hears these stories and hears that like there is hope. And, we're of course available in the Midwest. There, Dr. Schurger's in Springfield, Illinois, and I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. But there are chiropractors across the country who do this work. And what's the Blair website that they can find a doctor?
I think it's blairchiropractic.com is the first place they can go to. And that'll help them find at least a Blair chiropractor. And shoot, if they need to reach out, certainly we can find somebody else who might be close to them.
Reach directly out to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a lot of times if there isn't a Blair doctor in your area, there's probably an upper to say that we're the best. We still love our colleagues too, and they're great also. Definitely. All right. Anything else we want to touch on? No, I thought that was great. I loved hearing your story. I heard a lot of it, but I hadn't heard all of it. And especially, I honestly didn't remember, or maybe you did tell me, but I didn't remember about the trigeminal symptoms that you had. And I do think everything that we go through as doctors leads us to be better doctors for our patients, because we can use that as like our fuel to why we want to help the next person.
Right. Definitely. Okay. Well, we will be back in a week.
Yeah.
And people will enjoy more. Got some other ideas about stuff we should be talking about. And then,
I was hoping we could talk about some leading, like some science and things that might be coming out in the news that we can chat about.
Definitely. We should also talk about
that I've been seeing.
And I think maybe next week we'll also talk about a little bit about Dr. Blair and how
he's got such a good story.
He does. He really does. So I think we'll touch on that next week.
Lovely. It was good to talk with you.
Absolutely. You have a wonderful evening, and everyone
and all of you have a wonderful evening too.
And we'll talk to you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.
That's all for today's episode of The Blonde and the Bald. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoyed today's show with Drs. Bagley and Schurger, remember, don't give up and just live with the pain. Come back next week and get more answers and solutions. Visit our websites at KeystoneChiroSPI.com and PrecisionChiropracticSTL.com for more info, and catch all the episodes of The Blonde and the Bald.